Hello, everyone. This is Nyasha from Billy, and welcome to another episode of Billy on Air. Today, we have a very special guest all the way from Colorado. Her name is Kelsey, and I've had the pleasure of working with her. So we're going to get to know about Kelsey, and Kelsey's going to educate us on the process of insurance audits. I'm sure many of you don't like those, but we're here to educate you and provide you with useful content. So first of all, we're going to get to know Kelsey, and thank you for joining our show. How are you today, Kelsey?
I'm doing well, Nyasha. Thanks. How are you?
It's sunny here in New York. Really loving it. Can't wait to be in Colorado with you next week.
Yep, the temps have actually started to drop here, which I love. My favorite time of year, fall and winter. That's why I live out in Colorado.
That's amazing. And so people want to know, who is Kelsey?
So my name is Kelsey VanSleen. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I love it out here. I love the mountains, being outside, and I built a tiny house. I think that's a really interesting thing about me. I built, designed, and lived in a tiny house on a trailer. Before they were popular, actually. And it gave me a lot of insights into what it's like for general contractors and subcontractors to work on a project. It was cool to work on my own and kind of led me down the path of being in this industry.
Wow. I love how you've taken your experience of building a tiny house and ended up in the construction industry. Can you share with the audience exciting projects that you've worked on, even your tiny home? If you could describe what it was, how you built it. I'm sure people would love to hear nice projects that you've worked on that maybe they've recognized as well.
Yeah, so let's see. Starting with the tiny house, it was really interesting finding out how challenging it was to really estimate work. Like I remember we got a metal roof, and when we were estimating how many nails we needed, screws, and the amount of metal that we needed for this metal roof, how many times we had to go back and get more supplies because we just underestimated how many we would need. Props to estimators and really nailing that. It's very hard to do. And then, when I was an accounting manager working for a general contractor out in Denver, I got to touch the numbers side of all those projects. And the self-perform work was really fascinating to me. We did a lot of them. It's crazy. They can be really, really fast. We worked on building, just really interesting to understand the different types of work that a general contractor can do, and that self-perform arm or like a development arm, all the different ways that the general contractor uses to just bring money in and keep things going, and how quickly those projects can turn around, and how fast on the accounting side that you have to keep up and managing all the documents and making sure people get paid on time was really interesting with those self-perform projects.
And touching those numbers, sometimes accounting staff in a construction company do more than just accounting. What are some of those areas that you touched in your career?
Yeah, definitely. I wore many hats. I was the HR manager. I did payroll. I was responsible for compliance, which is what we're going to talk about here, tracking certificates of insurance as they went hand in hand with our payments, making sure that we were reducing that risk when we were releasing those payments. I also was involved in IT support since I, worked with Procore, that ERP integrator, brought in lien waiver software, time tracking software. So I really touched almost every single aspect of the business. Absolutely.
And related to insurance, there is a common event that happens a lot, and people want to understand what is an insurance audit. Did you ever encounter those, and can you educate us on what it means to be audited?
Yeah, so I was involved directly with 2 insurance audits. The first one resulted from or came about because there was an injury that happened on site, and it led to us uncovering that we did not have the certificate of insurance for that subcontractor. So basically that was kind of a red flag to our insurance company, and they led the first in-depth audit that we've really had that was a result of that accident. And the insurance company just kind of wanted to dig into more of, what was our record keeping like? How are we managing this risk and transferring this risk to our subcontractors? So an insurance audit is when hired by the insurance company comes in and wants to look at your records. And so basically they're looking at a certain period, a period that's already ended. And so as a general contractor, you paid a policy premium for that policy period, and the auditor is looking to ensure that you were charged the right amount of work, or charged the right amount for that policy period.
I see. And are there common types of insurance audits, or it's just one like the IRS?
Yeah, so I experienced two. It was the general liability and workman's comp.
I see. And of those two, why do insurance carriers audit general contractors? Is it because they just want to make sure that general contractors were signing contracts correctly and collecting insurance because they don't want to experience a loss, or is there another reason why?
Yeah, so general contractors, in essence, are taking on a lot of risk in their role. And insurance companies want to make sure that they are transferring the risk that their insurance carrier is taking on by transferring it to their subcontractors through proof of certificates of insurance that show that those subcontractors have the coverage that they need. Because if they don't, by nature of a general contractor, that risk falls back on the general contractor because they were responsible for ensuring that that risk was transferred to the subcontractor.
I see. So if the subcontractor didn't have insurance, then their risk would fall back on the general contractor and their insurance carrier, the owner, etc., to cover for damage or a loss. Okay. And what is this audit experience like? Does a person in a dark black shirt or coat come to your door and say you're being audited? I'm just trying to elaborate this for the audience.
Yeah, great question. So if you think about what it would feel like on a personal level for the IRS to want to come and audit your financings, think of that when it's just the same situation with a general contractor. It's overwhelming. It's you're unsure of, do I have all the documents and all the files that this auditor needs? And for me, we're thinking back to what I said about wearing many hats. I already was managing or responsible for a lot of different tasks around the company across departments. And so when an audit comes in, or you're asked to be a part of an audit, it's a huge project on top of an already full plate. So the amount of work that's involved to get all the documents that you need on top of your regular everyday responsibilities is definitely overwhelming when you're presented with audit time.
I see. And so when it's audit time and you get a letter in the mail or a person shows up, are those the two ways that audits happen?
Yeah, so before the in-depth audit that I mentioned, the first one that I was a part of, the general contractor that I worked for actually had in-person audits. The auditor would come in, ask to see a few files here and there. So I've seen and heard of audits being in person and varying from, just a few certificates here and there to being full blown. And then there's also virtual audits, which those are the two that was the audit that I was involved in for the two policy periods that I was audited for. They were virtual. The auditor reached out saying, this is the policy type that we're auditing. This is the policy period that we're looking into. These are all the reports that we need. And then we need all of the certificates of insurance.
Do you buy the auditors donuts if they come to your office?
I don't remember if they did, but that's a great idea to just make it. It's not a fun experience, so that would be a great idea to make something that's not fun a little bit more enjoyable.
In movies, they just lock them up in a conference room and crank up or the heat or the AC. But I'm guessing you don't want to do that with your insurance auditors.
No. Get it done as fast as possible is always the sentiment.
Since this is such an overwhelming process and you're not normally prepared, what are some of the struggles that people face during an insurance audit?
Yeah, so the experience that I had is, certificates of insurance are sent to a general contractor in so many different ways. Often they are mailed. You'll get just a stack of mailed certificates across all of your subcontractors. They're just sending them in, their renewal certificates. One of the struggles I had was sometimes vendors or subcontractors would send them to accounting. Sometimes they were going to the VP of finance. Sometimes they were going to the project manager. And so just scattered documents all over, whether they are in person or in email, in a shared drive, just all over if you don't really have a good process in place. And so that was one of the biggest challenges is, project managers they have a full plate as well. They have a lot of things that they're responsible for and are prioritizing. So to ask them to search their inbox for certain subcontractor COIs, and what was really hard on top of that were the dates. I don't want the current one. I need it for this policy period. And sometimes that was 2 certificates of insurance because your subcontractor's policy dates don't always align with your policy date. So you might need 2 from one subcontractor. So really getting all the documents that you need, but the whole team effort, that can be really challenging to do on top of your everyday responsibilities.
I see. And so this is why general contractors and accounting managers and people who handle insurance in construction companies feel nervous about insurance audits.
Yeah, one of the reasons for sure.
And tell me, Kelsey, what could go wrong if a general contractor doesn't manage contracts and things like certificates of insurance correctly?
Yeah, so it happened to me at the end of the first policy audit that I had. We were charged, we didn't have certificates of insurance for 2 really large, when I say large contract sizes for 2 subcontractors. They were on a lot of different jobs. We paid them a lot of money over this policy period, and we didn't have their certificates of insurance. So as a result of that, we were charged an additional policy premium of over 6 figures that we paid over the next year in increments, and it had a huge impact on cash flow for a very long time.
So essentially, if you're not managing contract administration correctly, so how you issue out contracts, how you prove that the subcontractor you hired is complying with that subcontract, has a huge impact on your insurance premium, because what you pay today is not the final bill until you get audited the following year.
That's exactly correct. Yep. And actually, to clarify something that you mentioned, this was really fascinating that I learned during this audit process, is the auditor was pulling payment reports that you paid to your subcontractor. They were looking at a certain report for during the time period of your policy period, and that is what they were using to collect those certificates of insurance. Basically, if they landed on this report, you needed to have the certificates of insurance for those subcontractors.
And this increased that premium, even if it was like over $100,000, eats into the profit margins of a general contractor because it's an unexpected, unbudgeted expense.
Absolutely.
So I guess a good analogy of this process of managing contract risk transfer as it relates to contractors is insurance is like a hidden change order, right? Until you get audited, that might, surface up as, a change order that came out of nowhere that you just weren't managing correctly, and it can tip your budget in a negative way.
Yep, definitely. And we used, when I discovered what report that auditor was looking at when they were, and that was a source of truth for that audit, we started using that report operationally to say, okay, if you land on this, or subcontractor lands on this report and we don't have their insurance, we know we're going to be asked for it down the road. So we were able to figure out, how are we going to know what we're going to need when audit time comes? It helped to really drive a better process because we knew exactly what the auditors would be looking for.
That's nice. And I love how you wrapped up this summary of how did your audit experience help you build a better process. And what I'm hearing is that it helped you just know what is required. And did you get a chance to overhaul the process, given that when it first happened, it seems as if there was no good process of managing contracts and proving that these contracts have the right insurance. So what did that process to overhaul your compliance process look like?
Yeah, so it's actually one of my proudest accomplishments from that job as an accounting manager was kind of conducting this gap analysis of where we're at, where we need to be, and talking to all the different parties involved, starting with the VP of Finance of who's going to be responsible for collecting these documents. He told me the project manager, so then I was able to go to the project managers and really understand what are your current workflows like? What is your workload like? How can I make, this is now your responsibility, how can I make this easier for you? And actually, it's so crazy. I landed on, a spreadsheet because accountants love spreadsheets. We're in them all day. And Billy actually has a spreadsheet that is almost exactly what I created. We actually have it on our website. You can download it. And that's just what we did. We used a spreadsheet and would audit that report that I mentioned since I knew that was the auditor's source of truth. We would pull that report and then use the spreadsheet to just help us track and manage those expiration dates.
When you make changes in construction companies, let's say you want to introduce a spreadsheet, sometimes it's technology that you're introducing to, standardize a process. How do you get buy-in from the company in order to be successful? What were your strategies?
Yeah, great question. I started with really seeking to understand because, people are humans first. And if they feel heard and, they know that whoever wants to make this change wants to bring them alongside and make them a part of this process, they're so much more open to change because, you're starting from a place of wanting to seek to understand what are your concerns. Because, if you don't partner with people, then they can feel like, like kind of a bottom-up approach versus a top-down approach. So that was what I really found successful is, talking through these are the changes that we want to make. How can I make this work for you? And really partner with them to think through how we can, get what the business needs without negatively impacting the employees day to day.
That's perfect. And how did your process, this new one, impact the following year's audit?
It was great. We knew what was coming and we were like, we are prepared. This is great. We're so much more organized. And it really helped us feel prepared and we just knew where things were because we had set up a system where it got the whole team on board. Everyone knew what was required, where things should live, so that when time came, we could just pull everything out and hand it over to the auditor.
That's excellent. And in your experience, how do softwares like Billy help general contractors in insurance audits?
Yeah, so when you think about how many projects a general contractor can be involved in, it can be upwards of 100 or more projects. And the challenging part of tracking insurance across all those projects is that there can be, and there often are, project-specific requirements that can be so hard, and honestly, were not managed really well in our manual spreadsheet tracker. But software really helps software like Billy and how we do things. It helps to bring the team on the same page with, the project manager has let us know that these are the requirements that have come from the owner. These are different. These are the additional insured parties that differ. That's the one thing that usually changes from project to project, and helps the people that are responsible for reviewing documents, keeping subcontractors accountable. It keeps all that information in one place and allows a lean team to all be on the same page. And then offloading the renewal process. Billy sends out reminders 30 days before renewal, 15 days, and then on the day of expiration. So really offloading the need to even remember to track expirations is how Billy really helps administrators to tackle the compliance process.
That's amazing. And I know we're almost up on time. What is a topic that you recommend we should interview people next time?
Good question. I think something that is really challenging is, and I kind of touched on it a little bit, but there are just so many strategies, and one strategy doesn't always work for everyone. It's change management, because that's such a It's not specific to compliance. If you're adopting a new project management tool, the change management there, it can be really challenging. So I think that would be a great topic that would really benefit general contractors, because it's not always something a lot of people are familiar with or comfortable with even thinking through. So I think that'd be really helpful.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kelsey, for coming on to our show, and for our guests. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you again.